With this being another huge historical event in universe, the opening sequence of episode 45 sees the return of Armin's narration as he reflects on the scouts' attack. On a first watch, Armin's, however, pretty clearly refers to Hange's big tumble, while with the benefit of hindsight, I think it's safe to say that it is much more so referring to Rod's transformation and the entire incident to follow. If this were a historical retelling, this is where their queen Historia retakes the throne, so naturally, it is preceded with the however, as there is still a ton that we'd have to go through first. And of course, the final shot is of our big boy Rod slurping up some of that sweet spinal nectar. As for the title of the episode, Outside of the Walls of Orvud District, you know why it's called that? I'll let you think about it for a second. That's right, because the episode takes place inside of the Walls of Orvud District. Moving into the episode itself, before we get to any of the story, let us talk about the abnormalities of Rod's transformation, which of course pretty clearly also evokes Eren's Founding Titan transformation. Though instead of jumping right to theories and interpretations, let us first talk about the fundamental mechanics of Titans as we know them. Firstly, we know that each and every Titan is constructed by Ymir herself within the paths. Every shifter, every normal Titan, the Wall Titans, all of them come from the paths. So yes, Titans like Connie's mom, who just sorta slept there, were indeed done dirty. Or maybe they were actually saved. Which connects to number 2, the existence of these abnormal Titans. For whatever reason, there are Titans who can somehow break the fundamental rules of how pure Titans operate, to the point that in Ilsa's notebook, we even have the Ymir cultist that could speak. As usual, in case you've never seen this before, it's a part of Ilsa's notebook that was turned into an OVA, but it is 100% canon. Importantly, however, despite the odd behavior, even with this seemingly intelligent pure Titan, she would still end up killing Ilsa. While she didn't eat her, those fundamental instincts of the Titan still bleed through, meaning that yes, she is abnormal, but she is still a Titan. Which brings us onto the very important numero 3. As far as pure Titans go, we've only ever seen transformations happening through direct injections. Delete the comment, I know, let me cook. In the real world, injections are used for the simple reason that they go right into the bloodstream, aka the effect is faster and much more concentrated. So by that logic, with sufficient spinal fluid in your system, you should technically immediately transform. So it seems like there is a sort of inflection point, right? But wait, I hear you say, numero 4, that is not the only way we've seen people transform. We've seen that the laced wine worked, the gas in Ragako worked, and we of course also have Rod himself who just drank some of the spinal fluid. Though very importantly, with Rod, that transformation was immediate. Whereas with both Ragako and the wine, they were only transformed by Zeke's scream. So to me, the only viable explanation is that it is a question of potency. People who have the spinal fluid in their system can be transformed, but the effect will not be immediate until some sort of critical point. But wait, because this goes even further. Numero 5, when we see Grisha being transformed in both the manga and the anime, the officer says they'll turn one of them into a 3 to 4 meter Titan, implying some degree of control. That is to say, if we can turn you into a 3 to 4 meter Titan, well then maybe Rod knew how to transform into this weird abnormal thingy. I don't think that is the case, but it does seem like the transformations are actually not entirely random. On top of that, number 6, we know that the transformations happen from the spine. Thing is, Rod's back seemed to have been either broken or at least dislocated by Historia's Giga Chad shoulder throw. And the problem there is that shifters cannot transform while they are severely damaged, they need to heal first. The best showcase of what happens if they aren't is Eren's Founding Titan. Had he not made contact with Zeke, there would be no rumbling, and that would be the end of that. But because he reached Ymir herself, his body was remade even with the immense damage dealt to it. But even so, in the same way that Rod's Titan is this weird disformed thingy, Eren too becomes a very long boy. And on top of that, at the start of the season, we saw how when Eren is exhausted from repeatedly transforming, only a score really forms while his limbs are basically not there at all. With Rod, he is not a shifter, so he becomes a pure Titan with his spine severely damaged, which probably explains why he is not fully formed, but doesn't explain why he grows so incredibly big. That is all the sort of concrete evidence we have, so let us construct some hypotheticals. Starting with the potency angle. Well, to be totally honest, I don't think this makes much sense considering the injections are full vials delivered right into the bloodstream, whereas Rod barely even touches the serum. But then again, let us loop back to that Grisha 3 to 4 meter Titan thing. perhaps that actually further contributes to his messed up transformation, as in he was in direct contact with the concentrated serum, but not enough to warrant a full-fledged transformation, which feeds into another hypothetical about which Titan serum they were using. The one Eren would gobble up in a few minutes was the armored, so perhaps old Roddy Boy here got his hands on the colossal spinal fluid, which would have otherwise turned him into a very, very big boy. But because his back was broken, and because he didn't get enough of the serum, it instead massively overcompensated just around his core. The evidence for this is Falco. After he got Zeke's spinal fluid, he became, well, a falcon. Something that seems to be much, much closer to the Beast Titan rather than the Jaw, right? And the most interesting thing about his abnormal form is that he also has, well, very abnormal behavior. Broken record Korotos once again, but later we'd see right through his eyes and how Titans perceive other people. From a Titan point of view, they are these small glimmering lights, which of course retroactively explains why Titans don't attack other animals. They only target people because their fundamental instinct is to return to their human form. But okay, that is irrelevant right now. What's more important here is that Rod completely ignores individual people, even those he could have snatched up immediately with like zero difficulty whatsoever. Instead, he goes right for Orvud District, or in other words, a massive number of people all bunched up in a small area. So it's not just that his Titan is abnormally large. His perception too has been warped so as to only perceive huge numbers of people at a time. And something that I haven't mentioned yet is the fact that Rod is a royal. Unfortunately, our sample for royal pure Titans isn't exactly large. Dina, for example, is so closely intertwined with Eren's story that I don't think you can draw really any conclusions there. That said, we do know that Zeke's scream is a result of him possessing royal blood, so it's clear that it does at least have some effect, perhaps amplifying the abilities of the shifter or something like that. So with that in mind, could it be that if someone were to have royal blood and then they became the Colossal Titan, they'd be even bigger than the Colossal Titan? Maybe, but with Rod, I think it again loops back to his broken back and a failed transformation. Or on the complete flip side, because all the Titans are constructed by Ymir herself, maybe she deliberately constructed him in this messed up manner so as to punish him and to strike back at the royal bloodline. Eren and Historia both did just tap into the paths. So perhaps some of this is a result of Historia's hatred for Rod. I mean, she too is a royal. But even with the clear Founding Titan foreshadowing, I don't think that's really what's going on here, and it doesn't really fit in my opinion. But wait just a minute, this is overanalyzing. I have another completely unfounded argument to raise that I don't think I've ever seen mentioned anywhere else. We talked about the abnormals and potentially controlling the result of the Titan through the injection yada yada, but what we didn't talk about is the serum itself. Even in the world of Attack on Titan, the Titans themselves are not understood, plain and simple. The serums create them, and that's really all that matters. The soldiers clearly don't care enough to even watch them do anything, they run off, and it's fine. So entertain this idea real quick. What if the abnormals are not just a completely random mutation? What if they are a result of mixing Titan serums? What if this whole "I'll turn you into a 3-meter" is using just a small part of the vial and then just topping it up with another Titan spinal fluid? The reason why I bring this up is because there are certain commonalities between the abnormals. Particularly those walking on all fours, a trait that is exclusive to the Jaw and Carts, right? And I guess some of the Beast Titans as well. Remember the abnormal that yoinked Eren's leg off? Doesn't that seem like a pure Titan of like the attack stature but using the Jaw's movement? Like, I'm sorry, but the leap up for Eren's leg, that is 100% the Jaw. And note that I'm specifically talking about abnormals here. Connie's mom was also malformed, and there they all had the same exact gas, right? With Connie's mom, I think it was just a potency issue. But then again, there is also the small Titan dragging itself from the sea exactly as Rod did. So yeah, I honestly have no idea. But okay, pulling all of this together, my current interpretation / theory / call it whatever is this. Abnormal Titans are a result of insufficient or improper injections of the serum, where the serum itself might also be mixed with another serum. By extension, Rod's messed up form is a result of said double improper injection. Perhaps the Jaw or Cart and the Colossal or something along those lines. But as we see, because his back was broken or at least dislocated, the transformation compensated for that and, well, his movement is impaired. Alternatively, if you don't like the mixed serum line of thinking and the abnormal Titan mechanics angle, well, just take the Colossal serum and the same explanation applies. He should have been bigger, but because of his injuries, his form is not properly developed and the transformation overcompensates for the injury in the same way that his Founding Titan form is very, very long. What I also find a little curious is how some of the Titans, and particularly those of royal blood, share the same characteristic of a very pronounced ribcage. But then again, there are also exceptions, like Connie's mom and the Dragging Titan, so I think you can't really draw any concrete links there. But yes, do let me know whether you have a different interpretation on all of this. In many ways, just like I've mentioned before with the Ackermans and stuff, I actually like that we can't really explain Rod's Titan because, well, they're called abnormals for a reason, right? Some mystery is always fun to have, and if this is literally just a random mutation, then sure, why not, that's cool. But alright, finally moving into the story, we continue where we left off with the story of freeing Eren. First off, those Founding Titan parallels continue with the crystal pillars being destroyed, in the same way that Eren would undo the hardening of the walls. Just like the walls, they may be extremely durable, but when it comes to Titan powers, well, we already saw what happens when Eren fought Annie. And that of course also ties back into Reiner and Bertolt's oddly precise strikes that never seem to reveal the Wall Titans within. Some might even say that they had been purposely striking at the gates. Though Eren then cries, just telling Historia to eat him. Like we talked about last time, with the benefit of hindsight, I think you could almost infer this to be him trying to escape the future that he already suspects. As of right now, it's of course not fully conscious yet. But I don't think it's a stretch to say that there are a lot of memories of both the present, the past, and the future all bleeding together, which he just wants to get out of. But my absolute favorite thing here is the color scheme. Note how the sequence has this gradient of warm reds, pinks, and oranges. Some might even say it looks like a sunset. And some might even say it looks like the one in the final season, aka their last conversation where Historia would once again be trying to stop Eren. Or I guess in this case she's not trying to stop him, she's trying to save him, but in the final season she's trying to stop him, which is also saving him, you get the idea. In this case though, I think Historia's line of, whenever I see people crying because they think they're not needed, I want to tell them that they have a place in this world, summarizes their entire relationship very, very well. You can easily say that Historia in the final season is not being entirely rational and not doing enough to stop Eren. And yes, these characters are not robots. For better or worse, Historia as a personality is a carer. That part never changed after she became queen. She offered herself to become the Beast Titan if it meant protecting the island, right? So whether it's here or during that sunset in the final season, Historia still tries talking him down for the simple reason of having lived through all of that herself. For her, this whole big picture morality and what's right and wrong and the world as a whole is almost secondary. Because her entire life has been about finding her place in, really, the world. Why should she care about the world when the world doesn't care about her, right? So again, when it comes to Eren, it's a matter of helping him and not really whatever he's doing, it's just about him. Funnily enough, I think the somewhat intense split in the community about Historia kind of proves my point. There's a pretty sizable group of people still shipping Eren and Historia, and even saying that the farm lad is a poorly written story, yada yada. But on the opposite side, you have people blaming Historia and saying that she is equally responsible for the rumbling. As with most things though, I think the truth is right in the middle. I think the reason why some people think of Historia and Eren as partners and the other side blames Historia is because both Eren and Historia often push themselves to become martyrs. Their whole self-sacrificial thing just creates a connective thread between their characters that I think some wanted to explore more while others just didn't like. Them understanding and caring for each other doesn't mean they're in love, you know. I think I've rambled on plenty about the farm lad and Historia's story before, and I'll do it again as well, so let's leave it there for now. In short, I think both here and in the final season, Historia's whole "I will become the worst girl to have ever lived" is just her personality. She is a carer first and foremost. But one thing I absolutely have to mention is the music as the Levi Squad shows up. That slow piano transitioning into the full-on orchestra is just so good. And this shot right here is just perfect. First off, note how none of them are currently in their uniforms. Much like we talked about last time, this is no heroic mission beyond the walls. This is not a fight for mankind. No, this is a very dirty, very bloody, and very unpleasant human conflict. As for their personal styles, Sasha of course has her bow. The Ackermans are both beside Historia, so again, that Kingsguard angle. Connie and Jean are, well, just Connie and Jean. But Eren stands alone right in the middle. He is not afraid, he's not shielding his eyes, he is just sad. Despite all the MPs the scouts have just cleaved apart, It is his face that is stained with blood, and no one else's. I think this loops forward to the Jaegerists and the image that every single Eren stan uses as their profile picture. Only there, we already see how they do not stand side by side. There, he truly stood alone. And of course, outside of all the character implications, this scene right here just looks like we're standing at like the gates of hell or something, or like fighting against Durin's Bane or something like that. It is just really cool. And also, there's a little scene here of Cavan calling to Kenny, but he just tells them to get away. Considering this whole thing ends with all of them being dead, I think it just works to further humanize them a little bit. Even amongst these assassin MP dudes, there is still that camaraderie. And yes, I did accidentally call Cavan Alma in the last video, it was late, okay? Though we then see Eren notice a vial with just the word armor on it. 1,000,000% overanalyzing, but if this were to be Marley in text, it could be another little cool moment of Eren's, or I guess Grisha's, memory surfacing. Chances are it is just LD in text though. Also, the piano is really cool again. But as Eren again just cries, saying that it's all useless, Historia tells him to snap out of it, asking whether he's just going to sit here and die. And Levi too says, sorry to keep making you do this, but you have to make a decision. Eren's progression from just hot-headed to somewhat level-headed to just pure aggressive is a really interesting part of the series. Because in moments like this, his standoff against Dina and even his fight against Annie, that boiling hatred is always there. The one and only thing that changes is everything surrounding that. Take his transformation and trust. What kickstarts Eren and gives us the very foreshadowy scene of his entire family literally burning down is Armin reminding them of their dream. In that situation, it is pure hatred for their cage. It is a burning desire for freedom. In his standoff against Dina, it is much more tender. What kickstarts him is Mikasa and Mikasa alone. It's those bonds that push Eren to fight for his loved ones. Though here, it is just numbness. He doesn't want to sit and die, but he also doesn't want any of this anymore. So, somewhat paradoxically, that numbness is the thing that keeps pushing him to fight, because it is no longer about him. It is now about everyone else, regardless of what happens to him. And this of course also loops back to the death of the Levi squad and his hatred of himself there. A simple way of putting it is that Eren in this sequence is kinda like Walter in episode 1. And so, Eren gobbles up the armored vial and just leaps ahead. First off, it is again an instance of Eren just magically knowing what to do in the same way that he got visions of the key and how to transform, etc, etc. Clearly, there is a cocktail of subconscious memories now surfacing. Though secondly, the whole I will keep fighting even if I myself am already dead angle has really interesting connections with Reiner and, of course by extension, the armored's vial he just drank. And no, I certainly don't think it's actually Reiner's spinal fluid, by the way. That doesn't make any sense timeline-wise, but you get what I mean. If you look at Reiner's meltdown once they landed on Paradis, he quite literally said that Reiner is now dead and that he would be Marcel for them, in the same way that Eren just leaps straight ahead without ever thinking about himself. Even visually, both of their faces are absolutely drenched in blood. Both have detached their personal feelings for just about everything, and both are just fighting with clenched teeth right up until the very end. So, in a very roundabout way, the armored spinal fluid once again connects Reiner's and Eren's stories as not at all that different. And of course, that numbness also comes with some pretty intense whiplash, best showcased with Eren's attack on Liberio or Reiner's transformation atop the wall. When they begin fighting for this one singular goal while being completely detached from themselves, some pretty messy things begin to happen. But okay, time to overanalyze, because the shape Eren's hardening creates looks awfully similar to a birdcage. Almost as if Historia not taking his Titan means that he is now trapping himself. Huh. Though as we jump to the top side, the zoom out we get of Rod's Titan and the sheer destruction it is left behind is just incredible. And the dudes immediately saying that this thing has to be twice the size of the Colossal just immediately cements it as, well, let's call it a dire situation. Also, like I've mentioned 100 times before, we see that the crystal pillars aren't just a thing right under the chapel and that they're actually holding up the ground for pretty much as long as we can see, which to me reinforces my whole 50-meter wall Titan arguments. Also, the OST here is excellent as usual. It's just so hectic, and those sort of breathe-ins, I guess, I don't know what to call them, but they really sell the unease of the situation. We then jump on over to the mid-card, talking about Eren's newly acquired Titan hardening. I know a few people have said that the walls look nothing alike the crystals, and that the Warhammer's abilities also look entirely different, but I think all of it is just a matter of look. Even Eren's crystal form does become a little bit darker than these shiny, sparkly crystals. And Levi would also very explicitly note that the walls were probably created with the same thing. Generally, I think basically all the hardening that comes from Titans is roughly the same. And something that I've also seen a few people ask, how did Annie acquire the ability to harden? The explanation is actually a bit more complicated than just hardening, because the female Titan's power is kind of a mix of everything and her core power is sort of mimicking the other Titans. Energy-wise, she seems to have way more stamina than Eren, so that could be Ewing from the Cart Titan. Her being able to encase herself in the cocoon is basically identical to the Warhammer. Her scream could be Ewing from Zeke, but that's not really the beast's power, that's more so Zeke's royal blood, so it could even be a sort of a low-level form of the Founder's power. We also saw her completely unhinging her jaw when she was fighting Eren, something that we've never seen with the other shifters, so that could be the jaw. And of course, the hardening comes from the armored. The only one that really lacks any concrete examples in her imitation is the Colossal. But even there, you could say that her transformation on that street in Season 1 was kinda bigger than what we normally see, but okay, that's up for debate and frankly doesn't even matter. That's just a very, very long-winded way to say that Annie's Titan has elements of, if not all the shifters, well, then at least most of them. However, the thing that always had me scratching my head is this. If Eren could slurp down the armored spinal fluid and get its hardening, why aren't all the other Marley shifters juiced up with each other's power? A armored Colossal sure sounds handy now, doesn't it? At the same time though, perhaps it's a bit of a deadly combo. As in, if Eren hadn't been literally dug out by Mikasa, he'd be dead. I don't know, maybe if like Reiner drank the Colossal spinal fluid, dude would straight up nuke himself. Okay, now we're going off the rails, but interesting to think about. You certainly wouldn't want someone like me doing your Titan science, that's for sure. Okay, but seriously, why aren't there any armored Colossals? Returning to the episode, as much as Eren's hardening is a pretty big reveal, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but this whole thing actually loops back to the very first episode of Season 2. The whole goal of Season 2 was to learn of how Annie did the whole crystal magic and just use it to plug up Walmaria. So all of those side quests with the big monkey and everything else in a very, very roundabout way still ended up progressing our main quest. And also, like I already mentioned, this whole crystal protection thingy that Eren pulls here could also be a nod to Eren first doing the sort of half transformation to shield Mikasa and Armin. But yes, to realign our sights, Eren then notes that following this, their next goal is the basements. But let's not forget the absolute best part, Sasha, who absolutely roasts the living hell out of Eren for being a pathetic crybaby. The English VA absolutely knocked it out of the park here, so if you haven't heard it, big recommend.
You look like an idiot and my fate was in your hands! Quit your bawling! Have some dignity! That's what I was thinking anyway.
As is very much trend with this episode, we get some more excellent sound design. Those horror shrieks and just the occasional lumbering boom is so good. And the shots of the entire surrounding area just catching ablaze looks like the most FromSoft thing ever, and I love it. Also, boo, CGI horses. Okay, this joke is getting very old, we'll put it on cooldown. For now. Okay, but for real, the background for the shot is actually low-key cursed. Though Erwin then learns that our big boy is actually Rod, and what I love here is how he immediately goes to check Historia's reaction. We all know Erwin by now, he is cooking up a plan, and considering the whole coup d'etat, Historia's cooperation is critical for what comes next. This is just him sort of checking the chessboard, if you will. And on that note, he says that for now, they are in fact dragging it right to Orvud. And again, that distortion sound effect is so good. As we hop on over to the carts, Hange basically summarizes everything we've been talking about for the past couple of episodes. Then just noting that if this was the king's interpretation of peace, well, that's certainly a disagreeable perspective. And you know, Hange, you got a point. From a purely practical perspective though, obviously all of Hange's theories here is just recap now that we are moving into the next arc. Though Eren then again floats the idea of feeding himself to Rod, saying he would turn into a human then. And right away, in what is a very cheeky way of presenting evidence, we hear opposing opinions from Levi and Historia. Levi says that, yes, it is worth considering, sort of what we might think as the viewers, if it's just one dude against the whole thing, makes sense. But Historia explains that there are simply too many unknowns. Most of all, what are we going to do if he becomes the founder and immediately wipes our memories? I've mentioned this in passing before, but you have no idea how many insane conspiracies I was cooking up while watching these episodes. Like, seriously, they keep talking about all this memory alteration, and there were like 5 separate times where I thought we had already lost our memories and just didn't know it yet. I even thought that this whole abnormal massive titan thing might be a clue to something being off, and again, we just don't know what it is. It seems very, very silly in hindsight, but this is Attack on Titan, you know? They revealed the armor titan as just a thing. You never know. But anyway, point being that this is nothing like the female titan mission. We can't capture him, and we can't really pull any titan shenanigans. The only real way of stopping him is the good old-fashioned blade. And we then move into the absolute best part of their conversation, as Historia notes that Grisha certainly did what he did because he was trying to save humanity from the first king. In a very roundabout way, she is of course right, only it wasn't Grisha, it was Eren, or actually Ymir. But hold on to your pants for this one, because if you haven't rewatched the series, as we move to hypothesizing about the true intentions of Grisha and a potential different way to save them from the Titans, the Reiss family OST plays that, to me at least, carries the same exact vibe as The Other Side of the Sea and Declaration of War.
だからエレンに地下室の鍵を託した。
It's of course not the same exact motif, but considering the conversation and just how it creeps into the scene, my eyes light up each and every time I rewatch this bit. And also, the whole "our only way forward is to kill your father" once again ties together Eren and Historia's stories in what I think are obvious ways. Both of them have now lost their fathers to the cycle of bloodshed and grand visions of freedom. And also, the super fourth wall breaking line from Sasha is super whimsical.
地下室ってつまり大事ですよね。
As they make it to Orvud, Historia is caught up on the whole coup d'etat and told that Erwin needs her to step up as queen. In the same way we talked about molding these narratives around the coup d'etat itself, they now need a pretty little story of the rightful heir retaking her throne. In a way, it's another one of Erwin's famous gambles, since, well, first off, there was absolutely no guarantee that Historia would even survive all of this, and number two, there was no guarantee that Historia would ever want to take the throne. And actually, that is exactly what Connie and Jean both note as well. They just ask whether it's not kinda messed up and sort of unfair to ask her to return to the life she has now said that she wants to leave behind. And this is where I think your personal perspective on the story of Attack on Titan and kinda life as a whole will really decide how you interpret her decision. On one hand, this is different because it is not something she needs to do. This is not something that is just pushed onto her because of her lineage. This is not her father telling her to honor some supposed legacy. No, she alone explicitly says that this is my choice. But on the other hand, if your perspective on the story and really free will as an idea is a bit more nihilistic, ultimately, she is still a slave to duty, is she not? She can tell herself that she chose this, but did she? Can she ever be sure that her entire life, all of her insecurities, all of her pains, her being born into this royal family to begin with, and so on, didn't shape this exact choice? I don't think this is an exact quote as it differs between sources, but Arthur Schopenhauer, I think that's how you say his name, I'm not sure, but he once said that a man can do what he wills, but cannot will what he wills. Or, in other words, fundamentally, people have no free will. Let us look at Historia and the things outside of her control. She was born in 835, could not control. She was born on Paradis of all places, could not control. Her parents were Rod and Alma, could not control. Rod was actually a royal, making her an illegitimate, but still a royal, could not control. As a baby, she was already wheeled off to some remote farm, where the only thing she could learn about the world was farming and reading the occasional book. Again, could not control. Not even delving into all the memory shenanigans and all the fantasy elements here, if so much about a person's life is effectively RNG generated before they can even speak a single word, can you ever say that any of your decisions are truly your own if cumulatively, like 99.99999% of your experiences stem from the things you could not control? Now, the simple and obvious argument we also talked about a second ago is that it doesn't matter what came before, because I exist in this moment and I can choose. But can you?
Hey, Vsauce! Michael here.
Very, very dumb and very simple example. Let us say that I, Koroto, want to go to Japan and visit Eren, Mikasa, and Armin's statues. Well, the reason why I want to do that is because I have never been to Japan because I was born on the opposite side of the world. So effectively, that desire I'm having right now was actually shaped by where I was born 2 decades earlier. Again, I know it's a very, very dumb example, but I don't want to start talking about the socio-economic situation, you know? It is that question of causality that shapes most of Eren's story and is exactly what we see with Historia here as well. In my opinion, there is a very good argument to be made that absolutely nothing you do, or will ever do, is not just an outcome of causal effects that started years and years and years ago by completely different people. And sure, you can tell yourself that this is your decision, but I think that is unironically just coping. On one hand, this is purely philosophical and really changes nothing, right? But on the other hand, if you do accept these causal effects and do sort of accept the fact that, yes, a lot of who you are is not actually who you are, well, I think that is a much better way of understanding why that is the case. As in, I could tell myself that I am extremely lazy because 2,000 years ago, like, something happened and now I'm lazy. But the really interesting part is when you don't use it as an excuse, but rather use it to sort of fix the problem. There's a lot of really interesting stuff about this in psychology to sort of understand why some people seem to just do the things they do. Big recommend, I find it fascinating. But okay, on a lighter note, Mikasa tells Historia that when she's queen, she'll get to punch Levi in the face, which is frankly uncalled for, but definitely funny and goofy. And on that funny, goofy, but also very philosophical note, this is where we'll pick up next time. I'm working on this literally the night that the previous video went up, but I'm sure we won't be debating the Wall Titan height all over again in the comments, right? We absolutely will, and I love it. But anyway, next time we'll be diving into the climax of the Rod Reiss Titan arc, and eventually finding our good buddy Kenny. So, I hope to see you back as we continue overanalyzing Attack on Titan. And that's the video. This time around, I'm not quite done planning out the next video, but my Attack Titan does tell me that there is actually a chance for a double episode one, but we'll see. And also, complete side note, but I want to pick your brain about this. With all the new projects around Avatar, Game of Thrones, One Piece, and basically every other franchise, am I the only one thinking that it's kinda weird there hasn't been anything to do with Attack on Titan yet, aside from that Levi thing? I mean, even Breaking Bad got Better Call Saul and El Camino. Are we like actually 100% done? No way, right? Don't get me wrong, on one hand, I am very glad that we are done. They're not trying to milk it or anything. But on the other hand, I think there is a ton of story potential around the original Titan War, a la Fire and Blood. But who knows, maybe the realization that it's truly over is just finally hitting me. Do let me know whether you're expecting something else, because I sort of am, but it's already been so long that maybe this is it, maybe there is nothing. But alright, with that, I want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons and YouTube members who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. And let's also give a warm welcome to the newest members of the team, Lightbringer, Justin, Suter, or Souter, I don't know, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, and Jugface. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my ramblings, so seriously, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching, I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!